We're here today with Merrill Pereira from Healthy Habits. Welcome, Merrill.
Thank you, Justine.
What is new at Healthy Habits?
The Healthy Habits company has been around in Australia for more than 20 years. I took over this brand 10 months ago, and one of the first things I've decided to do is come up with a whole new brand look. So I'm moving away from the bright colors and the smiley faces, and we're also coming up with a new menu. We've just conducted some consumer research in Australia, and the early findings have been that 60% of Australians are overweight, and then another interesting number was that 70% of Australians want healthy food to be tasty too. So at Healthy Habits, I'm coming up with a whole new menu that's got Australian spices like pepperberry, lemon myrtle, macadamia nuts. We're also coming up with our own signature bread, which is made up of 9 grains and is very low in sodium.
What changes have you instituted since becoming Managing Director?
Most managing directors, when you take over a company, you want to spend the first 60 to 90 days having a look at the current model. So I spend a lot of time talking to the customers, both internal and external. Internal were the people that are working with the company, and external being the franchise owners and the suppliers. And then I worked out what we needed to do from a strategy point of view to move forward. And part of that strategy meant making sure we had a new brand look, a new menu, making sure I had the right people on my bus, and I would just be the driver of this bus, and they would lead me, and I would lead them. And then the final thing was to make sure we had the right operations in place, so that when we decide to grow, we've got things in place, we've got systems in place.
What are some of your short and long-term goals?
Short-term goals for sure has to be to grow the current business, grow same-store sales and profits, and then also work out a way by which we can sustain this growth. Long-term, we currently are only in 2 states in Australia, being Queensland and Victoria. We're also in New Zealand, in Christchurch. But my long-term goal is to grow this brand into all the other states like Western Australia, South Australia, the ACT, and in Sydney. Another thing that I want to work on long-term is execution. Make sure we've got the right model in place so that we can execute and scale this brand.
Tell us a bit about your book, Expand Your Brand.
I've been fortunate enough to I've had 23 years with an amazing brand being McDonald's. And so in the last 16 years, I worked with McDonald's setting up their company all over the world. So I set up the Middle East, and the country was Saudi Arabia. And then I also set up the whole South Pacific with countries like Fiji and Tahiti and Samoa. So I've had some amazing experiences, and so I thought, I'd like to share my experiences with everybody. And so I wrote a book about, what it takes to take a brand into a new country. So it talks about how do you do feasibility studies, what are some of the challenges you have dealing with a small country, and what are the challenges you have dealing with a big country. I talk about my experiences with dealing with joint venture partners and some of the challenges you have dealing with governments. It's a funny read, it's an easy read.
What did you learn from your time at McDonald's?
If I had to look at just putting this down to my top 3 points, that would be the key learnings for me at McDonald's. The first one is McDonald's is big on the 3-legged stool. And the 3-legged stool concept is where one leg is the franchisees, the second leg is the corporation, and the third are the suppliers. All 3 legs need to be strong. All 3 legs need to be working together and profitable for this brand to succeed. And McDonald's works on that, and that's why it's very successful. The second one is talent management, succession planning, and diversity. McDonald's does an amazing job with this. We've got women leaders in most of the countries in Asia and in Australia. Succession planning, you live by it. A few years ago, 2 of the CEOs passed away in a 12-month period, and McDonald's had 3 people ready to take on that #1 role, which is amazing for a company and a brand as big as McDonald's. And the last one I'd say is execution. McDonald's, if the competition had to get a plan, the marketing plan of McDonald's, and work on what McDonald's was going to do for the next 6 to 12 months, they would still not be able to execute as good as McDonald's, and that's the power of the brand.
Thanks for your time today with QSR Media.
Thank you very much, Justine.